Okay, so I think we should be recording, although I would like confirmation of a red dot somewhere that I'm not seeing, but let me. Yep, okay, it looks like we're recording. So anyway, first of all, welcome everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Christine Harrington, and I am delighted to be serving as the Executive Director of the Center for Student Success here in New Jersey. And I am just beyond thrilled to work with so many wonderful leaders across the state on such important, such important initiatives such as Guided Pathways. So what we're going to do today is we have a wonderful webinar in store for you, Guided Pathways in Action, the Mott Community College story. I just want to share with you a little bit of information about the center, and then I'll turn it over to our colleagues in Michigan. So for those of you who aren't familiar, the mission of our center really is to work with all of the 19 community colleges in a very collaborative way to increase both the successful experiences and outcomes for our college students in New Jersey. We're using a Guided Pathways framework to kind of guide us in terms of what kinds of activities we're going to support. And you can see here there are 4 primary buckets, making sure students have good pathways and programs to participate in, making sure we have good onboarding or intake processes that help students with the advising and the career exploration, making sure that's really strong, ensuring that students are learning, so supporting faculty in the teaching and learning process and making sure that's a really effective, using effective pedagogical practices, etc., in all kinds of coursework, and then making sure that students stay on the path and are supported. So that's the framework that we're using. Our strategic priorities this year, which we're in the process of developing a more formal strategic plan, but our priorities and our focus will be on issues such as advising, career exploration, student success courses, and program maps. As you can see, those are all very much Guided Pathways centered activities. And then professional development, not just for full-time, but also for part-time faculty. In addition to that, we also want to increase our college readiness and college credit now work that was already well underway, and really make sure that we continue to offer those kinds of services and programs to our students. So at this point, I'd like to introduce, we have our colleagues in Michigan. So many of you have been asking for models about, from colleges that are more similar to us than dissimilar. And Michigan is really, I think, a great fit for us. And I have to thank Dr. Jasenia Mattis for identifying these fabulous colleagues out in Michigan for us and really kind of just saying, Christine, this is a really good group of folks. I think we can learn from them here in New Jersey because they do have a similar story and path. So without spending much more time, I want to just, first of all, thank our panelists here and tell you a little bit about how this is going to work. So we have with you, as you can see, Dr. Amy Fugate, who is the Vice President for Academic Affairs, and we also have some faculty members. So we have Aaron Goulis and Dr. Candice Munoz, and I think based on my conversations I've already had with them, I think you're going to find the information that they have to share to be incredibly real, genuine, and practical in terms of some just tips and strategies that they have discovered along their path there in Michigan. They will be doing a presentation first, and then after the presentation, there will be time for Q&A. And for my Guided Pathway leaders, as you know, we're having a follow-up conversation afterwards. We're going to log out of this, and we're going to log into that meeting. So if you're a part of that initiative, we will be having a separate process. So without further ado, I will go ahead and turn it over to our colleagues. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so they can start sharing theirs. And hopefully this all works well.
Okay, you should be seeing a screen that says Mott Community College.
I do.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. We're going to start with Dr. Fugate. Our camera is supposed to shift to whoever's talking, but if it doesn't for some reason, don't panic. It'll catch up.
And when it does shift, which it did, it will still say Aaron Goulis because he put this together, so he put his name on all of us. And so anything that you want to quote after this, just use his name, please. And I should tell you that he stopped by my office today right before we were going to do this and said, I should have thought about this when I stayed up till 3 a.m. last night watching election results. And I said, oh, so did I. So if we doze off, just say something to us and we'll come back to it. But I'm sure some of you did as well. So it's an interesting day today. I will share with you that Michigan briefly is a state of 28 rather, independent community colleges. We have an independent university system, and the idea of pathways of any kind was really foreign to us in this state. The way it's set up in our state is you develop articulation agreements with our universities between the community colleges, and you have to do it by every single department. And so there's hundreds and thousands of articulation agreements floating around, and you can imagine how infrequently those get updated. So when the idea of guided pathways came to Michigan, it came to us through our Center for Student Success. And they put together a meeting and they invited all the colleges to send a team to come and learn about guided pathways. And I think, quite frankly, we're shocked when out of the 28 community colleges, 24 showed up. And there is just such a strong desire in our state to try to find some method of doing things in an easier way for our students, to give them a path that allows them to go from us into a transfer program without having to do all of these convoluted things that we do that end up with our students getting mad at us because they transfer somewhere and credits don't transfer, or they didn't take the right classes. And so that's what drew us into the guided pathways. We had so much interest that in our state they broke it out and said, well, we'll take schools that'll be in cohort 1, then we'll do a second cohort and a third cohort. And so we happened to be in the first cohort. And I think one of the keys to us was that I had been involved with a lot of the transfer work at the state level already. So I had been keeping the faculty apprised of some of the things we were doing on this, and that this idea was coming down. And having been a faculty member for 20 years, I was a faculty member that hated every year going to our kickoff meeting at the beginning of the year and hearing some new initiative that the vice president threw out that we were going to be involved in. And then the next year it would be a different new initiative. And usually the two didn't match at all. So I try very hard to not be throwing a lot of just new initiatives and without making some links. And so I had been talking with the faculty about this idea that I thought this was where we might be headed. I didn't know. But then when we got into cohort 1, I let them know that and said, the one catch is we're going to have to move quickly because of some of the deadline dates that we had institutionally, not things that were put on us from the outside, but just what we needed to do. So for me, the guided pathways very quickly became, I was the lead on it for our college. So it was a coordination from my role of coordinating the things that came up on the list earlier for you. So a lot of that was student services and a lot of it was academics. And at our institution, sometimes there's a disconnect between student services and academics. We're under different leadership, and so that sometimes doesn't help things but the group I knew I could work with very quickly was faculty. So the other groups started doing some committees and some cross-functional committees, and I can share more with you about that later. But our immediate focus in Pathways was a curriculum focus, and that meant that the faculty needed to be involved. And it also meant for me that it would be far easier to sell to the faculty if it was other faculty selling it. And so Aaron, at about that time, came to talk to me about doing some different kinds of work besides teaching. So I got him involved with this. I had another faculty member involved, Dr. Bruce Dutra, who then moved to New Jersey. So I don't want to claim that Pathways did him in, but he's now a dean at one of your colleges out there. But he was one of the faculty leads for us as well on the Pathways initiative. And then it really involved the faculty all across campus working on it. So I think that's kind of the background that got us into Pathways. We started in September, and we had to have it done by April 1st. And so that's the time frame we operated in. And our goal was to create a pathway for every single discipline on our campus. And so that was no small undertaking in that amount of time. but we wanted to try to do that because we open up our fall registration. The fall was it. We had a year to do it from the State Center for Student Success, but our fall registration opens April 1st. So we wanted to have them in place for our fall registration, which started and goes through the summer. So that was our self-imposed deadline to do this in a few short months. And we were successful, and not all the colleges in Michigan were successful, and I can share some of that as well. But we were, and I think it's largely due to the faculty driving it. So with that, I'm going to let Candace, Erin and Candace talk about what happened with them, and they come at it from different standpoints. Erin was in a leadership role, and Candace was one of the faculty that was just out there on the front lines having to do this as the coordinator of the communication department. And so we have some departments at our college that are one faculty member, we have some that are two, and then we have some larger departments too. So it was every size range of department working on this.
Okay, so in addition to creating the semester by semester course sequences for over 80 different liberal arts disciplines, as well as occupational programs. At the same time, our IT department was implementing something we called Backpack, which was a system to guide students through these pathways that they choose, and to make sure that they can track their progress. The camera hasn't moved, so let's see. I think so, maybe. Okay, has the camera moved? Hey, there it is. Okay, so we're at the same time we were doing these semester by semester sequences, we were also working with our IT department to figure out how to get these sequences into a new software package that they were implementing. So there were a lot of moving parts beyond just curriculum, and Dr. Fugate will also a little later talk about the student services side as well, with advising and things like that. So how did we do it? Being a faculty member, I underlined and italicized and bolded and capitalized faculty leadership. I do not think this would have gone as smoothly if there hadn't been faculty members, not just because I was one of them, but without faculty members that were telling their colleagues sometimes, hey, this is great, this is awesome, let's look at how this can help students, and let's do this, and it'll be great. And sometimes, depending on the colleagues we were talking to, look, we got to do it. They're going to make us do it. If you don't do it, who knows what they'll do to you. So, you know, depending on who you talk to, and that sort of changed the tone. We also did a lot with working collaboratively between the faculty who were in the leadership positions and other faculty who were in charge of our professional development program, creating opportunities for faculty to work together on these things. Also, as we worked on these, and I'll talk about the nuts and bolts of that in a second, we kept an eye on transferability. We wanted and I think I might have misspelled transferability, but I'm not sure, wanted to keep an eye on making sure that courses that faculty placed in those pathways were courses that would transfer to our university partners, particularly the University of Michigan campus in Flint. And we really made an effort, and this was kind of new for us, to emphasize courses that transferred as equivalent courses, not just transferring as general credit or general education credit or time served, or however it shows up on the transcript. We also had to think about what would happen after we developed these discipline-specific pathways for history, communications, English. What do we do with students who don't know what they want to do? We decided to kick that can down the road for 6 months while we worked on this project. Yes.
I should mention that a lot of the pathways models say to start with meta majors, and that it's easier to come up with like 6 meta majors where you can group courses together and put every student that comes in into one of the 6 meta majors. And there are some really successful programs with that. And I would say, look at that. I didn't do that here because of knowing the faculty culture at this college. I think if we tried to do meta majors first, we would have been bogged down. We wouldn't have met our deadlines. We would have been bogged down arguing about what should be a meta major while everyone tried to fight to get their classes into one of the meta majors. And so I made a conscious decision early on based on the culture of my college. And I think as you move forward with this, it's important to consider your culture. Other cultures, they never would have been able to do what we did with looking at all the 80 different areas and doing that. That would be overwhelming in their culture. So it was easier to do the 6. But here, I felt that the faculty buy-in would come working with their own disciplines first. That if they could get their discipline up and running, then they could go back and talk about meta majors, which is the approach we've taken. And that's not the approach that's used in a lot of the CCRC literature that came out about guided pathways. They all focused on the meta majors to begin with. But I would say, you look at your culture and decide what method works best for you, because you want to get the most done that you can right out of the gate.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And as far as camera, hello camera, as far as the nuts and bolts of what we did, I'll just keep talking while we fiddle with the camera. Basically, we created a very simple template based on a spreadsheet. There we go. Because lots of schools have different ways to write down what their semester by semester path is going to be. And in talking with our IT people, again, lots of moving parts, we knew these things would have to be on the website. And in talking with our IT people and our web team, we decided that if we put all the courses in a spreadsheet, they could work out a way to sort of automatically import the data from the spreadsheet into the website and hopefully save a little time that way. So it was very simple. We simply set up a spreadsheet, and you have fall of year 1, and you put what we considered to be a full course load for a full-time student, 12 to 15 credit hours in there, and then winter year 1 and spring, summer, and then fall, and sort of created an ideal course by course, semester by semester path for a student taking those courses. It was different, of course, for the Associate of Arts and Associate of Science degrees than it was for the occupational programs. For the, what we can just call transfer disciplines, faculty had to think about this in a way they'd never thought about it before, because these pathways had to do a couple things. The first thing they had to do was they had to fulfill the requirements for a degree. That was non-negotiable. You can't just have, well, our students transfer without getting degrees, so that's what our pathway reflects. We weren't going to do that. This pathway would lead to an Associate of Arts or an Associate of Science degree. So we had to make sure that faculty had all the degree requirements met, which means for the first time, faculty had to think about their disciplines in terms of courses besides their own. Because I'll be honest, when I heard history pathway, I was like, well, take these 10 history courses and the rest of it isn't my business. But that's not how it needs to work. So you have to figure out which courses need to be taken when, which electives from other gen ed areas complement that program. And when you think about transferability as a faculty member, you also have to think about things like which of these gen eds that I think would be good are accepted at the schools where most of our students transfer to. So in history, for example, we struck up some relationships with some actual faculty members across town at the U of M campus here. Unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of time in our schedule for a lot of those conversations to occur. So transferability is still something that we're working on. We also had to think about the fact, and this is a different way to think about it too, that when a student finishes their associate's degree and transfers, we never really thought about it as they are then hopefully going to be a junior majoring in whatever. And so by the time you get done with those courses in your degree here, are they ready to be a junior in whatever discipline they're majoring in? So these are the things we had to think about, in addition to things like putting math and writing courses in the first semester. That was another non-negotiable thing. So right before I moved to Candace here, one last thing, my role as one of the faculty leaders and the other faculty leaders is when faculty were completed with their pathways, they sent them to us. We looked at them, we made sure they met the degree requirements. We said, are you sure that this actually makes sense? Do you realize we don't offer that class anymore? And sort of coordinated things between different faculty members. Now, Candace can talk about her experiences as a faculty doing this sort of thing.
One of the things that I think occurred in communication, at least, was that we were at the process kind of before starting the whole Pathways project of working with the Michigan Transfer Agreement. So we already had a lot of changes that were happening to our degree programs. And I think that really did open the door for faculty members to be willing to just clean it all up in one slot. So before, we would have students who would come in and they might say, hey, I'm really interested in pursuing communication. And there was no well-organized plan to really be able to help those students figure out what they wanted to do next, or even how that would work with the institutions that they were transferring into. And so as we began to think about the implications for our students, I think a lot of the faculty buy-in came in the aspect of really understanding that, hey, this is going to not only lay out the foundation for our students, but it's also going to give us a really clear-cut idea of how to help students move through these programs. And we obviously had a lot of that in a lot of our occupational programs, where it was really set out in terms of what students would take semester by semester. But in the humanities division, and probably social sciences as well, it was not very well thought out. And so it gave us an opportunity to really begin to talk with some of our colleagues, look at institutions in other areas, and figure out what was the most appropriate way to move students through those courses. And so I think that was one of the benefits that really helped in terms of us working on Pathways.
I think that one of the things that in talking about the Pathways and those other courses, it's really easy to click into what we took when we were in school. So Candace and I are both communication majors, so she and I could sit down and go, well, here were the gen eds that we took when we were in college. And it was trying to keep everybody away from falling into that trap, because needless to say, it's not quite the same anymore. And so, you know, it was encouraging these conversations, not only with the other colleges to see what would transfer, but also with their peers. And so being able, you know, at a faculty meeting to say, talk to, you know, figure out the gen eds that you want. Even in our occupational programs, the strategy here had been to say, oh, they need humanities classes, or they need social science, and we don't want to pick for them because we don't want to make any of our colleagues mad at us because we didn't put their class down. And so we really, a lot of time was spent with people, forcing people to narrow it down. And we had one holdout program in one of our occupational programs who kept telling Aaron that, you know, they just really weren't going to narrow that they were fine with saying a humanities class. They were fine with saying a social science class and letting the students pick. And Aaron kept saying, that's just not going to fly. You know, the vice president isn't going to let that fly. And he told me one day, this program's still holding out. And I said, well, then just tell them they're not going in the catalog anymore. Nobody will even see their program. And so he went and told them that, and they said, well, she can't do that. And he said, I don't know, she's crazy sometimes. So, you know, we could play some of the good cop, bad cop as well with some of that. But, you know, I think we have to get past this. And what I'd really hoped for were robust discussions about what gen eds would be good. I don't think those happened. And in one of our lessons learned for me is I probably should have made people stand up at the faculty meeting and say, here's why anthropology is a good class to fit in. Here's what I teach. Because we get so caught up in our own disciplines, we don't even know what people are teaching in those other classes. And so if I was doing it all over again, I would have taken a faculty meeting and given everybody that teaches a gen ed, you know, a 2 minutes, sell your program, 2 minutes, sell why this would fit in, or sell what areas this would fit into. What's happened as a result is we've got pathways set, and one of the things we said is they're not written in stone. And so, you know, curriculum develops, there's new courses that are put in. So Candace has a good example of she and her colleague in communication are now going back out and talking to divisions about what communication class would be good in their pathways. So, you know, the pathways can change as well. And so that's one of those things that I think is a tough thing as you're trying to get people to narrow down, because we just don't think that way. We've lived in the world of, oh, a student can pick, and the students have told us we don't want to pick, we don't know, we get overwhelmed when we go and open up social science and there's all this stuff there.
And there were some other just some other struggles and along the way, and lessons that we learned, such as, like Dr. Fugate was talking about, you can't have enough communication. And we didn't have time to have all the communication that would have been ideal.
On the other hand, you can also have, as you all know, you can also, as academics, don't worry about it, have too much communication.
Yes.
Where nothing ever gets done. So the deadline helped us get something done.
One question that we're still dealing with that still comes up is, what about part-time students? We developed these pathways on a model for full-time students, and people say, well, our students aren't full-time. We're 70-some% part-time students at this point. And the way we designed the pathways, and I don't know how we could have communicated this more clearly, but I guess we need to keep saying it. If there are 4 courses for a semester in that pathway, advisors advise your students to take 2. Take this one, and the next semester take this one and this one. Because there's people were saying, are we going to create part-time pathways? And the answer was no, because there is no consistent type of part-time student. It's one class this semester, a full load the next semester, they're gone for a year and a half, and then they come back and take 2 more classes. And you can't make a model based on that kind of unpredictability.
I think we're hoping too, that as we do this, that we can, with the pathways laid out like this, we can show a part-time student how long it will take them. Because we're trying to fight back on the part-time and get our students taking more classes than part-time. I'm becoming convinced from some of the colleagues I talk to around the country that we've let financial aid dictate to us what a part-time and full-time student is, rather than looking at how many credits it takes you to get through. And so I'm hoping that this, between our backpack, which shows the pathway, they will start thinking about, well, maybe I could take another class, or maybe I could do a couple more.
Students who place into developmental ed courses and undecided students were 2 groups of students that we made a conscious decision not to try to address in this first round of creating these idealized 2-year pathways. We currently have a team that is finishing up work on our meta majors that are for undecided students, and they have developed meta major pathways for undecided students that also have sort of alternate versions for students who test into various levels of reading and writing and math developmental courses. We've also created a college readiness meta major for students who place at the bottom level of developmental courses, because it's difficult to come up with a schedule for students who aren't able to take college level courses. So that are so low that there's very few courses that have prerequisites that are set that low. So we are in the process of finalizing that. To
say one thing about that, I think one of the things that happened as a faculty member, it kind of forced us to start having conversations beyond our own discipline. So as I'm thinking about these undecided students who were kind of jumping into communication courses, or the ones who are taking developmental classes and taking communication courses, we really had to start to think about the curriculum in a really broad way. So I could no longer just say, oh, I'm thinking about you take this communication class and this communication class. I had to think about what reading levels they were at and what would be best and what are the types of classes that work. And as I'm doing that, I'm often making phone calls to several of my colleagues and saying, hey, I heard about this graphic design class, and I'm wondering if this would be a good class to kind of integrate into our pathway. And so I think it broadened our perspectives as faculty members as well.
I think one of the other things that I would mention is that Erin mentioned briefly that we put English and math into the first semester. And we did that because based on our own data, we found out that our students were putting those classes off. And it was often one of the factors that kept them from graduating, kept them from finishing, especially math. But in English, they do Comp 1, but then they wouldn't do Comp 2. So we wanted to get those built into the sequence of you take Comp 1, then you do this the next. We'd also been working for a number of years before this on accelerating all of our developmental ed, revamping our developmental ed. So, one of the things we said to advisors, Composition 1 is in the first semester, but if somebody places into the developmental writing, they could do the ALP course semester 1 with the combined classes. So, we know there still has to be advising. Not everybody's going to fall into the developmental ed meta major, but they'll start those classes early. And that was just something that we kind of talked about, and I threw it out there at a faculty meeting, and people said, yeah, we get that. We get why they should have to do that right out of the gate. And we're hoping to see some big changes in our graduation from making those classes appear early.
And one last challenge that you will probably come up against as you do this is finding a balance between too many and too few course options. When we started the Pathways process, what we had been told by the CCRC people at our state level meetings is there are no choices. There's this course. They pick one course, and that's the course that should be taken. And so that's what we tried to do. And in subsequent meetings with people from CCRC, that dogma gradually shifted to, well, you can have a couple options, and like this or this history class or this anthropology class, because they're both good courses. So sometimes as we were reviewing the pathways that were submitted, we had to have some conversations about, is this too many choices? Or why did you list 5 literature courses in this slot? That's a whole lot. And the English folks explained, well, because in any given semester, we'll only be offering maybe 2 of those literature courses. So it looks like 5 on the pathway, but when the student is actually sitting down to register, they'll have a choice between 2 courses, or depending on the semester, it'll just be 1 course. Last thing, I wanted to show you what the end product was as far as on the website, how these things looked. And this is an example of how we took a degree, an occupational degree that has a huge number of credit hours and a lot of prerequisites, and turned it into a reasonable pathway. There's a pattern here. We've got a description. We've got career possibilities that are linked to Bureau of Labor Statistics data about number of jobs and wages and things like that. And then there's information about all of their requirements. And then on the pathway, year 1, fall, you have the course, the credit hours, the contact hours, and it just goes semester by semester. And when a student logs into their own information in our backpack system, it shows what courses are up next for them when they register. So you'll notice nursing, it's a lot of credit hours, it's a lot of contact hours. And this was a real challenge to put this into a pathway that didn't look like it was trying to be a 4-year degree for an associate's degree. It was quite a challenge. Less challenging was communication, which Candace and her colleagues came up with. And just to give you an idea of how these options look, comp for technical fields, math, an introductory communication course, and here for a social science elective, intro to sociology or intro to cultural anthropology. We're not making it, choose a social science. Down here, there's a choice of 3 humanities courses. But we did this web page, had faculty come up with all of this information, write descriptions, come up with job information and occupations, and we did it inside of from the moment we actually told faculty start working on it to when we needed to have it done. We had 90% of it complete within 5 months. So it can be done.
And I can say a little bit about that, because I think that this is where the whole kind of faculty-led buy-in thing came in. Aaron made it pretty easy for us. And I think as a faculty member, he kind of understood what we were up against. So once we started to get people to understand the idea of, hey, this is going to clarify how we move students through the system, and it's going to help us out in numerous ways, he sent us kind of like a model. We were shown a model at a faculty meeting so we could see kind of what it looked like in terms of history. And then when we actually started to fill out the paperwork, it wasn't just come up with your own. It was like, here, write a description. One looks like this. Here, you can go to this site and check out jobs that are related to it. And so the more things that can actually be done to kind of streamline the process made it a lot easier. And by the time I think he got the spreadsheets, everybody had the same template. And so that made it a lot easier as well. So.
I don't think any of us would say that there was no stress with this at all, or that the faculty, that everyone 100% bought in and wanted to do it. what they did buy into was we need to do this. It's about our students, and we participate. We're participating in this through our Center for Student Success. I think faculty pride themselves on the fact that we've done things for this center and do things well. But for me, it was a note I got from Candace as she was at a summer workshop, and she said, I'm sitting around with a lot of people that are struggling with this Pathways idea, and now I appreciate how you made us move quickly through this, because it was painful at the time a bit, but we got through it, and we are so far ahead for our students compared to some of what I'm hearing. So I think that was for me a good job. We did this. And I think understanding that as people work on this, the more you can do to help them. It's not a here's your deadline. It wasn't me going, here's your deadline, get it in, have it done. It was a process, and having a lot of faculty that got it done. Some thought it was fun, that said, we'll help look at other ones. You know, Aaron will join in, Bruce will join in, we'll look at other ones. There were a couple departments where nobody wanted to go and help them and talk to them because they get mean and nasty sometimes. And so you probably don't have any of those at your schools, but we have a couple. And so they would get their stamina up to go and talk to them, but in the long run, we made it through it. Yeah. So you want to open it up?
So I think I'll stop sharing our screen now, and if Christine can sort of explain what we might do to do the Q&A and how that's going to work, we'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Sure. So at this point, I think the easiest way to do the Q&A is for you to write your questions in the chat. Make sure it says from you to everyone. So if someone can start off, maybe Donna, you can write a question or something to get us started to make sure the feature was working correctly. But go ahead and write your questions in there. These folks at Mott have been, first of all, thank you so much for that amazing presentation. You really identified many of the challenges and questions that we are facing here as we're embarking on this process as well, and certainly can learn from the experiences that you had. So thank you. First of all, I want to take a moment to certainly just thank you for sharing your expertise and challenges and tips along the way. Very, very helpful.
And there's a question, a great question from Karen. In the pathway, is the order in which the course is listed meaningful? And you can all see the question there.
Actually, I don't see the question. Is everyone else seeing the question? Because I'm not seeing the question. I don't know if they're going in the question. You may only be able to see some of it. Okay. So you may have to be the one monitoring this. Just to let you know, Aaron. If I find them, I'll jump in. But go ahead and
Okay. So Karen asks, is the order in which the courses are listed meaningful? Are they listed in order of importance? Are they listed in order of desired sequence? So a part-time student would be advised to take the first 2 of the 4 if they are only able to take 2 courses. I think in some cases there are. For example, in the first semester, math and English are usually, I think we listed them first because those are the ones that are the most important. The order of courses and the sequence, what I have found as I worked through these with people, is the career technical education, the occupational specialty areas had much more rigorous needs for making sure students took courses in a particular order because of the skills that sort of build on each other. In the transfer areas, unless there are prerequisites involved, the order wasn't as important, and that's actually, it ended up being a good thing because some with limited numbers of sections offered and student schedules, they can sort of, okay, I can't take this one, but I can take the next one down because that's a day I don't work. So it depends on the area. So individual faculty will have to make some decisions about how rigorous that order needs to be.
And we actually, in communication, I think, spent a little bit of time really focusing on the flow of the courses. So as Dr. Fugate mentioned, we were in the process of creating 2 new courses when all of this was happening. So we also got a chance to sell some of our courses and tell people about why interpersonal communication, for example, was different than public speaking. So we began to list the courses in the order of what we felt was most important for students to take. So our interpersonal communication class, which is one-on-one communication, was one where we put it early on. Public speaking was another one where we put it early on. And then we also looked at just when those classes were typically offered. And part of that was based on just whether they had prereqs or just looking at kind of past semesters when students were more likely to take what other courses. So we put quite a bit of thought into thinking about how students would go through the courses.
Okay, on the next question from Kelly, I think in Cumberland, it says that you have 4 cross-functional teams working each week with some faculty involvement. And so I would say to that, one of the things I probably should have mentioned is we also had cross-functional teams working on all of the our intake system, our advising system, our orientation process that we do. Those were cross-functional teams, and I made sure that there were faculty on all of those teams. But those were different from the faculty, the things that we just talked about, the guided pathways that we did. But those were going on at the same time, and we have part of the guided pathways, we have revamped our intake system and those as well. I will say there was more work to do there, so those are still in process. But I think I think we've talked about the part-time. Because the part-time are so different, you can't come up with a part-time model. There isn't such a thing. And so that's why we stuck with the 2-year model, that for the ideal student, you'd go for 2 years and then you'd transfer on, or you'd get your occupational degree and either transfer or go into the workforce. And we're relying on advisors to work with a part-time student to say, well, here's the pathway, just start checking them off. And so we are sticking with that pathway rather than trying to do a model of it. And the DevEd, we did the 2 things with the DevEd. The truly DevEd student, that's where the meta major that Erin talked about is going to come into play. For a student that may just need some DevEd, they might need a writing class, they might need some DevEd in math, then they just start that in that first semester and they can get through it by the time they finish. So, but we rely on the advisors to say, you're going to have some extra classes, making sure that they understand that they'll have extra classes.
Another thing that I think has helped us integrate DevEd into the pathways is we're doing an increasing number of, we're continuing to work on accelerated learning DevEd courses to get students through those faster. And also we have a number of, I'm not sure how many we have, but courses, developmental ed courses that are linked. So a student can take a DevEd course and then the linked English 101 regular comp course. And we're even looking towards possibly doing developmental reading or writing courses that are linked with other gen ed courses. That would be a good way to integrate DevEd into these pathways. There's a question from Donna about summer classes, and I think Dr. Huguet can address possibly the impact would have on financial aid. But our pathways were not consistent necessarily with summer classes. Some CTE programs used spring and summertime to put their gen eds in, because they have clinicals, they have afternoon-long lab classes twice a week, and they need to get that history class and that communications class done. So our summer sessions worked really well for that. Others had those set aside for internship opportunities, so they didn't want any classes in those. And for others, it was mostly a place to put classes where you just couldn't seem to fit it, where you had a semester where it just looked like it would be really tough if you tried to put that one extra class in there. So, and sort of this was a generalization, but if you have a history student, and on average, the history students we talk to are not excited about taking science classes. So we said, okay, why don't we put science in the spring, where that will be which is part of our summer, or in the summer session, where that's the only class they take. So they can concentrate on the science and get through that, and not have to worry about a large number of classes on top of it. So it really is, this is going to sound like a cop-out, but it is very, very dependent on the particular discipline or program.
And the financial aid part, we're hoping to get back to year-round Pell. And so I hope that will resolve it. We did some things with scholarships or with students spreading out some of their financial aid as well. I'm going to jump to the next question, which asked how many of them are close to 60 credits, because this was a pretty fun one for me. We did, when we first did Pathways, there were some areas that were so excited about Pathways that they built, and the one that jumps to my mind is chemistry. Chemistry suddenly became an associate's transfer degree with 80 plus credits because they got so excited when they looked at the university. What did they require in their freshman and sophomore year? And they just said, well, we're going to add in all these classes because that's what the universities do. And we had to remind them, no, we're ramping it back down to 60 to 62 credits. Most of our programs were there. Some areas use this as an opportunity to really revisit that curriculum and cut it back. We have some occupational programs, nursing, for instance, that was working to reduce their credits. They use this as an opportunity to try to do it. Our culinary program did the same thing. We did some work on that, but we did not let people add to beyond the 62. And that was one of the fun things that some people got so enthused about, I'm developing this major and what this major could look like, and isn't that fun to do that?
Yeah, and in the same way, we had some other programs that weren't necessarily like excessively high in credit hours, but had courses that they wanted to go into a second and a half year, an extra semester, an extra year, and we had to work really hard to determine whether or not that might actually be necessary, and in most cases it wasn't. The next question is, have you or will you identify milestone courses or gateway courses, and if so, how do you communicate with students who are not successful in those courses? The meta majors group that is finishing up their work really struggled with this because it's in the transfer areas. I mean, what's a gateway course in history? Because is it World History 1 or is it U.S. History 1? There's really no introduction to the discipline. So that can be kind of difficult. So in general, the way we've thought about it is in the transfer disciplines, that first semester when they have their first history course or their first communication course, that's kind of a gateway. That's where we see if, okay, you just don't get it. And that would largely be a faculty and an advisor job. In the CTE areas, in many of the programs, they've already had some kind of introductory or course built in to their programs already before we even did the pathways. So they had done, I'm thinking of early childhood education, for example, does a very good job of identifying early on which students really will not cope well in a room full of 2-year-olds, for example. So the occupational programs already had something kind of like that in place, and the program coordinators took a very active role in guiding their students. For the transfer areas, it's a little more difficult.
Mention the revision of, I don't need to tell you what to mention. The other thing we did was we had some classes in our books that hadn't been taught for years. One of them was called Introduction to Health Sciences. One of them was called Introduction to Technology. And they were survey courses of the different areas in health science or the different areas within our technology division. And those resurfaced again and are getting a new life as we do the meta majors to try to get those broad-based intro classes. So the other thing with this gateway question, I would mention, if you're talking just the general gateway courses, we didn't make, how do people do your success in the gateway courses like general psych and the biology class. We didn't make that part of this pathways discussion. That's another discussion that we have as well, but it's not part of this. Candace, you got one there?
Yeah.
Next question? Or?
Yeah.
All right, so our next question says, how do you map prerequisite courses that are not a part of the degree? And this is where I think faculty members struggled a lot, especially with us trying to figure out what to do with the developmental students and undecided students. And so this came on as we continued the conversation with our meta majors, but the idea was that you're talking about starting students with their first level courses, so the English 101s and so on, and the other courses that they need to take are things that would happen before they really get strongly into the pathways.
And this was a huge issue with some of our health science programs, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and nursing especially, because there are these science courses, right, that they need to take. And what we did was we just sort of sat down with them and talked about, okay, how does your program work? Because none of us were health science people. And they explained it, and we sort of worked out a system where it's very clear to the student on the website, in their online backpack, when they talk to an advisor, that these are the courses you need to take, this is your pathway, but you have not started the program yet. And there's basically, we shared as much information as possible to make sure students know that these are courses they need to take. They are not a nursing student at this point. They have to do this, that, and the other to be a nursing student, and that there are reasons for this. So over communication is.
We separate those out with we separate those out with pre-nursing, pre-physical therapy assistant, and then there's the nursing pathway. Once you're in the program, here's the nursing pathway. So there's the prerequisite. We basically do the two pathways with it.
Next question. Oh, this one came up a lot. Wow. How does section enrollment and/or cancellations affect the pathway from the student end? If a student cannot take a specific class in a specific semester, what happens to the pathway? We don't cancel classes. No, just kidding. Never happens. This came up a lot because course cancellations are. This is the perennial thing that comes up whenever anything is mentioned under any circumstances, right? Basically, and it was actually where this came up as an issue was not talking with faculty, it was talking with the IT staff who had to program the backpack system that was sort of locking students like prisoners into a pathway. And basically what we sort of concluded was the guided pathway is not the same as the degree requirements. The guided pathway is not a forced march. If a student has Gen Ed, social science Gen Ed in the next slot, and the specified social science Gen Ed is full, or that section, that course isn't being offered, or that course gets canceled, well, talk to an advisor, talk to a faculty member, somebody hits a button and another course that fulfills the degree requirements can get substituted in. They can just hop down to the next semester and take the next course that they're available to get into, and then they don't have to take it the next semester. It's designed to be fluid. And that was one of the big concerns starting off, is that we would have this rigid system and systems in place that would basically, there was a fear that what happens if no student is able to register for classes and we have to cancel like a whole department's course offerings. And I said, that's not going to happen because that would be dumb. So we have, we keep it fluid enough that if there's a section canceled, if there's a section full, if a student wants to go part-time, but that course doesn't fit into their schedule with what they need to do, we skip down to the next one, unless they haven't met a prereq, they can do that.
It also allows us to predict the movement, right?
Yeah, I think one of the other things that's important is that you don't let those conversations sidetrack you from your end goal. And I will tell you that the IT people were like, you can't force them, you can't do this. These were our IT people. They weren't the faculty making this. This was IT. And I had to say to the IT people, you don't get to determine this. You get the program to work the way we need it to work. And so I think, yes, there is no computer program that can do guided pathways perfectly. There's a human element to advising students. There's a human element to saying, okay, that class got canceled. Let's look at what else is in your pathway. But what you can't do is just go, oh, what class is there out there at 9 o'clock? Because my 9 o'clock class got canceled. And so I'll just take something else at 9 o'clock. Because what we can't have happening any longer, which is what we did, was students showing up in my office with 90 credits of random classes where they had and I would say to them, why did you take Intro to Graphic Design? Were you thinking about going into that? No, it was available in the time slot that I needed. And I thought, why not? And when I can't put a degree together with 90 credits because the classes are that random, that's what, to me, the guided pathway stops. So you've got 4 semesters of courses to pick and choose from. but not going outside of that. I think that was a big thing. But don't let yourself get bogged down in those discussions. You know, I had the discussion with people, will you guarantee that you'll never ever cancel another class now that we put these pathways in place? And so, yeah, you're going to run your class with one student in it, but you know, you have a sense of humor, but don't let those stop your movement. Candace, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say the other thing that is happening kind of at a division level is because we placed the math and the English classes ahead, we're seeing an increase in students who are taking those in the fall, and it actually allows you to kind of see how the students are moving through the system. So I know that in our division, that's one of the things that we're excited about seeing, because there are a lot of classes that require students to take English 101. And now that we know that we have this whole pocket of students who completed or are in the process of completing English 101, we get to see kind of how they are moving through the system as we move on.
And this question, I know we're at about 2:55 right now, but this question from Karen is, this is like you sat at our college and heard everything that went on and asked the questions that we had to deal with. So follow up to the prereq question, what if calculus is the required course? Do you include the math prereqs into the pathway first, since many students don't arrive calculus ready? This is where I got to be Henry Kissinger, shuttling back and forth between Paris and Beijing. Basically, our math faculty said, and our physics faculty and all those folks said, if this is to be a 2-year pathway that makes a student ready to transfer to as a math major or a physics major, we have to have calculus in the first semester. That is the standard. That is what happens. That we will look Bush League if we don't have calculus in the first semester. And Dr. Fugate said that makes no sense. What percentage of our students actually show up ready to take calculus their first semester? And so they're like, but we can't have it out there that, you know, you can come here and be a math major and not be ready for calculus. And so our compromise was, and I'm surprised everybody agreed to this. I was kind of shocked and was waiting for everybody to say, no, just kidding, we hate you, was we had math put together their pathway that starts with math 170, our calculus class. That's the one that's on the webpage. That's the one people see. If the math police are checking to make sure they're rigorous enough, they can see, oh yes, calculus first semester. We also had them do a pathway that starts with pre-calculus. And there is a link in prominent letters, click here for pathway that begins with math 145. And so it's there. It's what more students are going to be using than the math 170 pathway. But the math people were happy to do it as long as the calculus one was the one that was facing the public. I don't understand why. They seemed to think it was important, so we came up with something to make it happen. But to answer your question, yes, we basically did 2 pathways. One that was for calculus-ready students, and one which was for the 97% that aren't calculus-ready.
I think one of the other things the math faculty wanted to do was, as we go out and work with our high schools to try to improve the readiness of our high schools and the initiatives in Michigan going on with that, they wanted them to see that that was on the pathway.
Yeah,
so if somebody went to our
true.
webpage and looked, they wanted a high school student to see, if you're going to be a math major, you need to be at calculus level. So get yourself in gear and start doing the math classes in the K-12 that you need to do to be able to come in at this. Or you're going to need to start in the summer in our math boot camp and get your skills up to be able to do this. And so I think, you know, I understand that from the math perspective, that they wanted that to be seen. So we did our what needs to be seen, and then our back reality. And I don't see more questions right now.
Okay, well, I'm going to just jump in then, because I know we are just about at the top of the hour. I mean, there were great questions asked from the participants, and really excellent responses also from our panelists. So I just want to take one more opportunity to thank all of you for participating and carving out time out of your very busy day, and really allowing you know, us to kind of come together to talk about these tough topics to really help us move forward on the Guided Pathways movement. So I want to take this opportunity to just say thank you once again to our panelists, our friends from Michigan. Thank you so much, Aaron and Candace and Amy. And you know, I can't tell you how much we really have appreciated learning from your expertise.
Oh, well, you're welcome. And we are, Christine, everybody has our email addresses. So if you have any questions that you didn't get to ask or that come up, we're happy to answer questions that you might have going forward.
Well, thank you. We really, really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Again, just so grateful for you sharing your expertise and time. And, it's always good to know we're not in this alone. There's colleagues all over the country grappling with the same issues and coming up with some solutions, which is even more exciting. So,
I have to say one more thing. We just implemented this for fall, and the feedback from our students is making everybody feel so good about this right now, because the students are excited and the students are telling people, I'm on this pathway, I'm taking these classes. So that they print it out and they show it to you, and so that makes all this work worth it.
That is fabulous. Well, thank you once again. And for my participants out there, just keep in mind that we will continue to provide additional opportunities such as this, throughout the academic year. We do have a teaching and learning conference on December 9th. If you're interested in, having your faculty participate, we actually have very good enrollment already. I know we're well over 100. I don't remember exactly where we're at with that number. But if you go to our website or if you email me at charrington@njccc.org, I'll be happy to get you the link over for that information. And once this is all recorded and saved, hopefully it worked. It's our first time using Zoom. We'll get it posted on the website, and I know that our friends in Michigan also are going to share their PowerPoint with us. So we'll get all those materials out to you. And so just thank you all once again. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting now. Thanks so much, and I hope you all have a fabulous day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
I'm hitting end meeting and